Hi guys, I'm outside the World Trade Center in Boston where Boston Comic Con 2014 was held, and we have an exclusive for you. We were the only camera in a Q&A for Scott Snyder, and it's just him in the crowd. Enjoy.
Awesome guy. Please introduce, clap your hands together.
It's like late on Sunday, and we're all like, you know, beat, but I really appreciate it. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, is getting to talk to you guys off the cuff and answer whatever you have is one of my favorite things, honestly, to do at these cons, so I appreciate it. So, I was going to have one of my friends come. Greg had to leave, he had to go back. I was like, oh, I know. But I was going to have one of them come and ask questions, but then it just becomes like a conversation between us half the time, so I thought I'd try and let it really be something where you can ask anything you want. I'll try to answer as honestly as possible, and it could be a train wreck or it could be good, but just, you know, good questions, anything you want, nothing off limits, and I'll try and be as truthful as I can. Yeah?
I was wondering, how do you find space, or what are your strategies for finding space for personal storytelling in these large blockbuster kinds of stories?
Well, that's actually the big challenge. I mean, for me, are there any sort of aspiring writers in here for comics? Yeah, yeah. I love teaching. Honestly, this is the first semester coming up that I can't. I'm gonna try and do it the semester after. But I teach. I taught writing, fiction writing, and then I taught comics writing in a couple places in the undergrad and in the grad program. And my favorite thing is sort of trying to explain writing iconic superhero characters and how it's different than writing your own stuff. You know. And the thing is, like, the way that it's different is that you have to make it the same as writing your own stuff. So what I had to learn, like, the big challenge is basically, like, let's say you have Batman, right? Everybody has, like, a dream Batman story, and, you know, and something they've always wanted to tell with Batman or whatever. But the challenge is for you to go in there and make it incredibly personal and make it the same kind of thing that you would do when you create your own book, while still staying true to the core, you know, Batman. And one of the fun things I like to do with students, honestly, is to do an exercise where I say, you know, what's a villain you want to see in Batman, for example? Is there one? For real. Is there one that you're dying to see, anyone?
Yeah, Mr. Freeze.
Sinestro.
Are you talking about a
Psycho Pirate?
Mr. Freeze.
What?
Are you talking about a
Mr.
Batman
Freeze.
villain?
Yeah, sure. Okay, Mr. Freeze. Someone said Mr. Freeze. Who said that? Okay, so why do you want to see Mr. Freeze? What do you like about him?
Well, when I think about it, I think of Paul Dini's from the cartoon series about his love story between him and his wife.
And his wife, right? Okay, so let's try and build a story for a second that speaks to that makes it personal for you, that isn't just sort of fan fiction for it, right? So let's say what you love about Mr. Freeze is his relationship to his wife, right? Or Nora.
Right.
So what's a way then of telling a story that gets at the stuff that you find most interesting in a way that expresses both your fears about it and your fantasies about it? So for me, let's flip it, I don't want to put you on the spot and be like, put you on the couch, right? But I can put myself on the couch about it and tell you, and this is a total spoiler, but I have an idea for a short Mr. Freeze story, and I am attracted to some of the same stuff that you are. With him, this sense of obsession about this lost love. And I think the thing that fascinates me about Mr. Freeze is you have to unpack it. And what fascinates me is this sense that he lives in the cold, and he's obsessed with the cold, and he is a walking embodiment of all things frozen. And at the same time, all he wants is to thaw this woman out from the past, and whether or not she loves him or he loves her, it doesn't matter. It's this obsessive thing where someone is lost to the element that he lives in all the time. So what I would try and do is then find a story, well, how do I get to that in a way that speaks to that? If it's just a Mr. Freeze story and he's the main character, well, what if I did something where he can thaw out other people, but he can't thaw out his wife because she still has this disease that can't be cured? But he does it almost to thaw people out as a way of proving he'll eventually get to do that for her. And then he has a gang of people from different eras that he thaws out from different cryobanks. And he has this hope that he can always put back on ice, so they have to do what he wants. And so what I'm saying is what you try and do is you try and pick apart what you find interesting about that villain, right? So Joker, for me, the reason he's so interesting is because he's like the devil in my mind, where he looks at you and he says to you, I know what you're most afraid is true about yourself, and I'm going to prove to you why that's true and why you're weak, and I'm going to tempt you with it, and I'm going to make a horrifying challenge, and I'm going to laugh at you the whole time. And that's really scary. And for me, that's why he's so interesting to pit against Batman, isn't because I like writing him because he's fun. He is fun. It's like monstrous fun. But it's because it cuts to the stuff that allows me to get to the things that I think are most vulnerable and heroic about Bruce, right? When Joker says to him, all you want is to be immortal. It's why you became Batman. You want to escape the possibility of getting old and dying, you know, and disappearing the way your parents did or whatever. Why? That's what I give you. I let you do that, you know. So deep down, you really want all your human allies dead. You don't want to be reminded that you're human, so come with me. And those kinds of things, they allow you to write the character like it's a creator own. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest challenge, honestly, writing Superman, Batman, those characters, is to take the character and say to yourself, I have to make this the same fear, like driven by the same fears and fantasies I use in my own work. And there's a reason I'm attracted to these characters that has the same DNA as those kinds of concerns. Meaning, you're not just taking the character and trying to inject yourself into it. When that happens, it doesn't work. You know, when you read a story where it's like that could be any superhero, it's just your interest in it. You try to assume that I love Batman, I've always loved Batman, he's always been my favorite character. The reason for me is that I always have had tremendous anxiety about time passing. Since I was a kid, you know, I've always had this tremendous anxiety about things going too fast and hanging on to things and all of that. And what appeals to me about Batman in a deep way is the sense that he's human, he's vulnerable, right? He's totally mortal. He doesn't have any superpowers. The city will be there long after he's gone, you know? And in that way, that's what drives our whole run in terms of my personal sort of writing. Court of Owls is basically the city saying, I've been here before you and I'll be here after you. You exist for one moment in time and you can never know me the way you want to know me. Joker is saying, you wanted to be immortal, it's why you got into it. Just do it, just burn them all. Or come with me and you'll forget that you were ever human and you'll escape the dirt and gravity and you'll be forever, you know, emblazoned on shields and legends and you'll be in the folktales. And Zero Year was about revisiting all of that stuff and having him accept the fact that he was going to do this forever and it would never get any better in some ways. And then Endgame, which we're doing next, is entirely about the same stuff. It's about him learning there's only a couple ways to cope with his own mortality, and part of it is about rebirth and sort of accepting the fact that things have to change sometimes. So for me, I mean, that I understand that's what appeals to me about Batman and Bruce, and that's what Dick Grayson had a whole different set of things that appeal to me. But that's what appeals to me about each villain in different ways. Like, why do I like Poison Ivy or why do I like Catwoman? Because they tease out these particular fears in Bruce, and I relate to those fears. And that's how I try and do it. And what I would encourage you, if you're an aspiring writer, try and take the time to figure out why you like the villains you like, and what is it that really gets under your skin about them on a scary personal level for you. Why is Joker exciting to you? Why is Mr. Freeze, or why is Catwoman, or why is Poison Ivy, or why is Two-Face? What is it that speaks to the thing that you would write if you did create your own stuff in Batman? Do you know what I mean? You have to write Batman like you made him up, and if you don't, you just get paralyzed by the fact that everybody that you love has written him better than you probably ever will. You know, so that's the big challenge. Yeah.
It's frustrating that you are trying to do something that is somewhat like a creator-owned story, while you also have to deal with all the DC continuity and all these characters that maybe you didn't make up. Does that ever get frustrating?
Yeah, he asked if it's frustrating dealing with continuity when you're trying to sort of do stories that you care about that are almost creator-owned. Yeah, it does sometimes, but the truth is, as weird as it sounds, I'm not trying to be rosy. We're honestly, we're good friends in the Bat world. Like Gail is a friend, and Pete Tomasi is a friend, and the people on Eternal are friends. And they were supportive of me coming up, and the way that I try and not run that line, but maybe drive it a little bit with Batman, is to make sure we all talk about what we're doing in the books and know what each other is doing, and then give each other enough room to make each book special and different from one another so we don't step on each other's toes. So then you know which villains I'm using in Endgame and what superheroes I'm using in that story, and then they steer clear of them. And I know what villains they're using, and we steer clear of each other that way and try and give each other enough berth. You know, so it hasn't been a problem, honestly. I mean, I've been very lucky. I know you hear a lot of stuff about editorial interference and all that stuff and everything, and those things exist, and it does happen. But I've been lucky. I had a couple good editors. Mike Martz really protected me when I first came in from a lot of interference. I mean, he let me get Jock on Detective, right? I mean, that's not a decent choice. I won't say he was on the book. Actually, it's a big superstar Marvel artist, actually. Very, from the 90s and early 2000s, like, great guy who I love, but more of a Spider-Man type artist. And that was on the book, and I was like, nobody, and they gave me detective. I was like, I think I'd really like to use Jock, and they were like, yeah, okay, I'll tell you what. They were like, Mike was like, you're gonna tell this guy he's not on the book, and you're gonna get Jock for it. I was like, I think that's the way to go. And he was like, I'll tell you what, if you get Jock to do it, because he knew Jock had a lot of obligations, then you can have him. And I was like, okay, all right, you know what, I'm gonna try. So I knew Jock was going to San Diego, and so was Francesco Francavilla, and I didn't know them, I just knew them peripherally, and I was like, I'm gonna go there, and I'm gonna win him over. So I went there, and I met him at a pub, because he was like, I'm interested in Batman, but you don't have a lot on my plate. And I was under the impression that if like, you know, he's this big Englishman, and I was like, if I can't keep up with him like having a beer, he's gonna think I'm a total pussy and not do Batman with me, so I have to do this. So and we were drinking, I was telling him the story, and you know, I'm a smaller man than he is, drinking. And finally he was like, I'm in, I love it. And I was like, yes, and I went home and I typed to Mike Martz, I was like, guess what, Martz? I was like, Jock is in. I was like, oh yeah, there you go. And it was great. And then they let me use him, Francesco, and bring back James Jr. And I don't know what it is. They just always, maybe I just got a lucky roll of the dice. But I've had people around, and now Mark protects me. And now I don't really need protection. I mean, me and Craig, honestly, they give us a very wide swath, and they let us do what we want on the book, pretty much. So it hasn't been frustrating in that regard, continuity stuff or the editorial stuff. I mean, and that's the truth. I'm not trying to do PR for DC. It just has been for me personally. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about American Vampire?
Yeah, sure. What aspect of it?
Like, you know, in the summarized version. Where did you come up with the idea? Skinner Suite, and where's the book going?
Yeah, well, American Vampire, if you guys are reading it, for me, that's the series that got me into
the vampire comic out there!
Oh, thank you. The idea came, I was down in a model store, actually, down in the West Village, and I was buying a birthday gift for my friend. And he was a big Doctor Who fan, and I went in this model store, and I was looking for Doctor Who stuff. And I saw a little Confederate soldier that was a zombie one, and it just sparked this idea where I was like, that's very American, and I kept thinking it was at the time when there were all these vampire things out. And I always love vampires, but my vampires are like Near Dark and Salem's Lot and Lost Boys and vampires that are indigenous to this country in the way that vampires at that time always seemed like they were in like a leather jacket going to like some club in the sewers. It was like super cool. You know what I mean? And you're like, hey, why are you going to rave in the sewers? Vampire, you have better things to do. But like it was always, you know, they're always so fashionable and like and exotic, and I like them for the opposite reason. I mean, what's exciting about classic monsters to me personally is that they're enduringly terrifying because they go back to the things I was saying earlier about having anxiety about getting older and dying and time passing you by. They're each a representation, at least in some way to me, of something you find safety in or love, like a neighbor, a loved one, a family member, or yourself, your own body, being taken away and being turned into a murderous, terrible thing that's unrecognizable. So a werewolf, right? You get bitten and you can't help yourself. You turn into a monster, a zombie. You come back and you're trying to eat your family. You know, a vampire technically should be the same thing, where you come up out of the ground and you're scratching at someone's window to kill them, and they're your best friend, you know, like Ralphie Glick. I mean, that stuff is scary. So for me, I saw that statue and I was like, how come, you know, there's no vampire that's like all American? And it just hit me. Honestly, I was like, well, why don't I make a new vampire that has powers that are, and weaknesses that are indigenous to this country, and use characters that are kind of iconic to American culture, you know, cowboys and flappers and all that kind of stuff, and it would give me a chance to go through all this Americana and American history I love, and turn figures from history and sort of cultural sort of, I guess, stereotypes into these kind of layered, more monstrous characters. So that was really exciting for it, you know. And then I pitched it. What happened was I did a short story. Somebody brought up this book today, actually. I was in the short. I was doing prose, and I did a short story on a lark on the side for this collection that was basically like literary writers make up superhero stories. And at the time, I was working in prose, and I had this like, forgive me if you've heard me talk about this, I don't want to be like repetitive, so just boo me if you've heard this story before, but I was working in books and I'd always wanted to be in comics, but I just sort of didn't know how to get into comics, and I fell in love with writing fiction. I went to graduate school for fiction after working in Disney World roaming around and all this stuff. And I got a very nice book deal right out of grad school, and it was for a short story collection, and it was for a novel. It was unwritten. And at the time, I was like, great, this is so awesome, you know, and there's all this money coming as soon as I hand in this novel. But we don't realize it's like they have to approve the novel. And if they don't like it, they're not going to give you that money. And I just totally didn't understand. I was, you know, and so the market contracted right while I was working on this novel, and I had success with the short stories. And I started handing in the novel as I had proposed it, and they were like, you know what, the market's changed. Your novel's about like a little barnstormer. It was like a guy, you know, like in a plane, like literally in like a wooden plane flying across the country in the early teens. It was like, you know, it's not like Michael Bay. There's not that. And the sense was that it wasn't going to make back the money they would give me if they gave me what they were supposed to. And I realized it was this terrible relationship all of a sudden, and I was going to keep writing this book, and it would never come out. And so I started doing things on the side, and my wife was just like, "Why are you writing a superhero story? It pays like $200, you know?" I was like, "It's really fun, and I hate going to work and working on this novel. It's never going to come out." And so the story was in this collection, and they did a reading for the collection, and I went. It was a few of us went and read our stories, and these two editors from Comic World, it makes you feel like there's no way into the industry that makes any sense, but these two editors, Mark Doyle and Janine Schaefer, were at the reading, and they got up afterwards, and they were like, they came up to me, and they were like, a lot of the stories are really funny. They were like about a superhero named like the Meerkat, you know, or another one was about like a superhero support group where it was like they had terrible powers, and so like one guy's power, the whole power was like he never had to go to the bathroom, and he was just like, where does it all go, you know? And that was like, and like mine was really grim. It was about like a guy who's like irradiated and becomes like a supervillain and bikini atoll tests in the 50s. And by the way, you know who illustrated it? It's pretty, I went back and looked because there's like little illustrations in it. It was Chris Burnham before he was Chris Burnham.
Wow.
Yeah, brand new. I know. I saw it because we both got into the industry, and I was like, wait a minute. You illustrated my little story. And he's like, yeah. And he was on ink, and I was like, oh my god, you know, it's awesome. We were just hanging out last night. And he's like, he's a good friend now. But anyway, they came to this reading, and they were like, are you serious about comics? And you? And I was like, yeah, I have comics in my bag. And I had all the Secret Invasion stuff and everything at the time. And yeah, I know. Sorry, DC. But they and when they pitched, you know, Janine first said, do you want to pitch? And Mark said, do you want to pitch? And I did. I pitched a few things for Marvel. And again, my wife was like, why are you pitching for this stuff? It pays nothing. And if you just get this book done and they approve it. And I was like, you know why? Because I go to work miserable writing this book. I'm like, drinking too much, I hate it. I've never been depressed like writing before. I have a job I should like, right? I'm paid to write. And I hate this book because it'll never be what they want it to be, and they're going to keep rejecting it, and I'm miserable. So she was like, okay, I'll tell you what, let's take out another loan, and you pitch for real. Like, go in to meet Mark Doyle and pitch him a real series that will preclude you writing this book. I was like, okay, you know, and so she's been great about that. I'll never forget that she was that supportive. Yeah, well, she is. And so I went and I did, and I pitched American Vampire to Mark, along with a couple other small ideas, but that was my big idea. That was like, this is my ongoing, and Mark really liked it. And the funniest thing is I didn't realize the two of them were on a date. And now they're married and have a kid, which I always joke is like a great DC Marvel crossover. You know, but she's I would always be like, wait a minute, you know what, my editor at Marvel, like, she never calls me back. And then she would call back, you know, 5 seconds later, and I was like, what a coincidence. And I never realized, like, the two of them were dating, you know, and just telling each other whatever I said. You know, I'd be like, my editor at DC, man, you know, he gives me too many notes, and the notes would suddenly dry up. What a coincidence, you know? Finally, they were like, yeah, we're dating. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know, like, aha, I'm Batman, figured it out. Right? It became a series. I pitched it, and it got rejected, actually, a couple times, yeah, and it was dead in the water, and it was focused on Skinner. I remember they were just like, we can't do a vampire western. And I was like, it's not a vampire western, it's going to go through all these decades. And they were like, well, then you got to rewrite it from a character's point of view that you're going to get to that isn't the cowboy. And I was like, okay, fine. So I rewrote it from Pearl's standpoint. Yeah, and they took it. And so she's like my favorite character of all time because she got me into comics. And then I sold it, and I was super excited. I dissolved this book deal with Dial Random House, and they were very nice about it, and they were very happy, I think, to be not having to have this anchor, this book that they were supposed to pay for eventually if they had to. And ultimately, what happened was then I approached, they asked me to ask for blurbs from people, and I asked Stephen King because he had read my fiction, and he had written a blurb about it, and he was like, he read the pitch in the first issue, and he was like, well, maybe I'll write write an issue sometime. And I was like, well, if I tell them that you want to write an issue, they're going to want you to write the first issue and not me to write the first issue. And anyway, he was very sweet, and so he wrote an issue, and as he was writing it, it got longer and longer and longer, and it was like 5 issues long, and I realized that he had enough to do. And it was based on the outline that I gave him, so all the characters, you know, had been created, and he was working off of a Bible of the existing series, so there wasn't stuff that came in that was super surprising in terms of, he created a couple characters that were great, but for the most part, he was working off of a kind of, a general sort of Bible that said what was going to happen in the series and who the characters were. And he went off-road in the best ways and told some great parts of the story that he totally made up. But he came in and did that, and I wish that he had been on it before I sold it, because that would have made a lot more money. But he was wonderfully supportive and great, and the series has been going ever since. I just finished my 50th issue, actually writing it, and I counted them up, so I was like, 34 regular ones, 10 mini-series, and this is issue 6, so it's issue 50, really. So I'm really, really proud of that. I'm very grateful to you guys for being so supportive of it. And I actually contracted it with DC so that hopefully it will go through about 76 at least. This was where I kind of see it beginning to get to its crescendo. And they were very, you know, very sweet about that and supportive. So I have a deal to get there no matter what happens. So I'm very happy that it's protected. Yeah.
So about the Joker's face.
Yeah.
What was it like for you and Greg to come up with, to decide to go through with such a huge change to that character? And did you have a plan while writing Death of the Family? Did you have a plan for Joker after the events of that? Because Future's End, in 5 years, he's going to have a face again.
Well, yeah, it'll be 5 years before he shows up again. There's always been a second part to that story. I mean, for me, the whole idea, by the way, we didn't do the face. That happened in Detective. And what happened was Tony Daniel was writing Detective, and DC basically wanted us to make up new villains for the New 52 and to kind of move some of the iconic villains to the side so we could show off our new villains. So we did Court of Owls, and his job was sort of to move the Joker away a bit, and he came up with a couple options. And I pushed him away from a couple of them that I thought would make it very hard to make the Joker scary afterwards, and I just worried that we wouldn't have a story for. And this one, at least, I felt I could work with in some way, and he had come up with it and thought of it, and I had sort of encouraged it as well. And so it was something that was joint, but I would say I don't want to take credit from him in the way that that was really his doing and his decision ultimately. And I just had said, if you do that, I know how to use that later on, but it's your call, and you can either do that or these other options to get him away from the DCU for a while. So that's how that happened. And then for Joker, yeah, it was always a story that's like, that one was supposed to be kind of about love, in the sense that Joker is saying, we love you, your villains. All of us love you. We love you as a kind of Bat King, and we are your subjects, we are your court, and we are here to keep you eternal and forever. We all transformed ourselves and sort of metamorphosized into these bizarre, sort of iconic, larger-than-life characters, because we're not human either. We'll exist forever in songs, and we are the legends of Gotham. But you have made a mistake, and you are starting to hang out with these human people that love you as whoever you are under that mask, and it's dragging you down. And Joker sees himself as making a real appeal to him, saying, this is what you want in your heart of hearts, is to kill them all. And then when he gets rejected and thrown off the cliff at the end, spoiler, spoiler alert if you haven't read it, he's going to come back now and be like, now I just fucking hate you. Now we all hate you, and now I'm just here to wreck everything. Because you ruined it. You're not worthy of us. So I'm going to take it all away. And that's always been sort of the love-hate sort of story for it. So there is a very thorough story plan for Joker. I just don't want to say when it's coming, because I'd rather, you know what I mean? Yeah, be surprised. But it's planned, and I hope you guys enjoy it when it happens.
What or who influenced you to pursue your passion in writing?
My parents were always pretty supportive. I mean, which is embarrassing. I was always like, why are you so supportive? You're supposed to be like, you can't write. But they were supportive, and they don't know anything about it. They're both in medicine. My wife is sort of like the son my dad never had. They like talk about medicine, and I'm like, what? I was like calling my wife, and she'll be in surgery, and I'm like, I have a very important question for you. I'm like, Bruce Wayne is hit by gamma rays. You know, that's not my field. You know, I'm a surgeon. You know, it's science. Science. You know, millions of fictional people's lives are hanging in the balance. But my parents were supportive, and it's a very scary thing. You know, you go into writing, and there were a lot of lean years. I mean, there were some scary times. I was, you know, tutoring and working Barnes and Noble, and you know, we were not in a good way money-wise, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I thought maybe I wouldn't make it. But I had a lot of supportive friends too that wanted to do it as well, and we just stuck together and showed each other our work, and eventually we began to turn around. But it's always very frightening. There's no real path with the arts. The thing that I would say is that there are ways of minimizing your chances, I think, of not doing it more than others. Like if you want to do it, you major it if you can in college. Find a place that has a major if you can. That was great for me because I started to make friends in that field, and we stuck together. And I'm still friends with my friends from writing workshop at that age, you know, from half my life ago. And similarly, I went to grad school after taking a couple years away from academics because I felt I needed to get in the routine of writing every day. And my friends from that are still, again, friends that I show stuff now that I'm in comics still. So you build a community that's supportive. That's what I would say, is you got to find people that like what you do, and these conventions are great for that too. And you stick together and you show each other your stuff, because it's a really lonely job ultimately. It's a wonderful job, like I love it more than anything. I go to work extremely happy, but there's no glamour to it, honestly, beyond what you guys see at these kind of things like cons and that. Of course, it's fun and glamorous to have people come up and say, "I love your work," or "Here's a book you wrote." But the actual work is, I go in my boxers to my office after I take my kids to school, and I sit there from 9 to 3 and I write, you know, and that's totally boring. Like it's not boring for me. I enjoy it, but I mean, that is your life. You know, that is what you do. That's your job. And you have to get used to saying, I'm doing that every day, even on days I do not feel like it. And you have to find ways of getting past your writer's block, which everybody has, you know. I have friends that have all these different methods. I was saying, I have this one friend that, like, whenever she got past writer's block, she put a marble in a jar, and then like put it, it's like, I got past writer's block. But her office is like filled with jars of marbles. It looks like a serial killer's office. It's like the scariest office to go into. You know what I mean? It's like, it looks like doll's eyes everywhere. You know? I couldn't work in here. This would give me writer's block. You have to find what works for you. You know, and respect your own process is what I'd say too. Like I have friends that we have totally inverted processes from one another, where I need to know what the story's about, where it's going to end, what the major beats are. If I don't know those things, I can't write it. I need to figure out what it means to me before I begin. And I have other friends that the whole fun of it is figuring out what it means to them as they write it based on a premise. And if that works for you, you do that. There's no right way. I had a couple bad teachers that were like, there is a right way. There's not at all. It's whatever works for you. The only right way is that you need to do it all the time. Like you can't be like, I'm going to wait months till I'm inspired. And it's not that I'm not making fun of that. I'm just saying you'll never finish anything if that's what you do when it actually comes time to be like, you have a deadline. And the deadline is, because that's one of the things I would just say to you guys. You got to remember, we're doing all this shit in continuity. Like, it's hard because, and it's wonderful hard, but it's hard. Meaning, like, I don't have the luxury of saying, I'm going to take 2 months off and figure out what's going to happen in the second Joker story, and just decide maybe we'll do the issues later. If it's coming, it's coming. You know what I mean? And if I say I'm going to do 0 year and it's going to start in October, it does not stop. There's no way out of that. It goes, like it's just going. So you better get good about deadlines, because that conveyor belt, once it starts moving, it does not stop, you know? So that's one of the tricks. I mean, I do wish sometimes I think the farther along we get, maybe we'll try and do more prestige stuff. Because I love being on the conveyor belt and doing the main line, but it would be nice also to be doing stuff with Greg or whoever, where it's like, you do a story that's 6 months, and you take 6 months away, you do a story that's 6 months, and you take 6 months away, because it is a hard belt after a while too, you know. And I've never been more excited for the stuff coming in Batman. I guarantee you, like, on my kids, I'm not bullshitting you to be like, pick up Batman. I mean, I'm not trying to sell it to you. It just is true. The stuff coming up in Endgame is some of the stuff I'm most excited about that we've ever done. And the stuff coming after Endgame, the transformation of some of the mythology based on what happens in that story, even in small ways, like the new characters brought in and old characters doing different things, all that stuff is meant to make it, rejuvenate it for you guys too. Like it's a book where you're like, I didn't expect that to be the way it is. And so that's the goal, is to keep it exciting. But it's hard to keep it exciting in continuity, which means you gotta keep up with that. So you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm gonna wait and feel inspired. There's tons of days I don't feel inspired at all. And you go down there and you know what you're gonna write is gonna suck, you know, but you have to do it anyway. I mean, that's what writer's block to me in my mind is. It's like the fear of writing something bad more than it is actual block, because you can still sit there and write. It's just you have to be able to say what I'm gonna write today is gonna make me feel sad about myself. And I'm gonna do it anyway, because eventually I'll get to stuff that makes me feel good again about it. And you just steel yourself against that, you know what I mean?
Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
I was wondering what the writing process for Batman Eternal is. Is it kind of like a TV show where you guys all write in a writing room, or is it something different?
Yeah, I mean, Batman Eternal, the process is basically we make up the whole outline. Like I made up the outline with James Tynan, and it kind of breaks down the big beats, so all the big things happening, arc by arc by arc. And then those guys we go in a room and we figure out what issues need to hit where, like what beats need to hit where, and then those guys really have the room to do the arcs the way they want as long as they hit those beats, so that it doesn't feel like a mess of like different priorities and sensibilities chopped up into one issue. It's like Ray has 3 issues to get the story where it needs to be and to play while he has those 3 issues, and that's what happens. And we're we also have to be very far ahead. We're writing issue like 43 right now of it, so it's way, way ahead, you know? That's the other thing. So that's kind of the process, but it's a great, I love those guys. I mean, Tim, you know, I'm hanging out with Tim here. I mean, he's a good friend. Ray, I call Ray all the time, bother him like constantly. And obviously James was a former student of mine and is one of my close friends. And you know, Kyle and I came up together. So all of us, and John was always great too. So I mean, you try and surround yourself with people that you get along with and you respect, and then you just help each other make that thing way in advance is the only way to go, I guess, you know? Yeah.
If you weren't writing Batman or Superman when you were writing that, which character would you want to write? And no pressure or anything, but Green Arrow would be awesome.
Right, he's a Green Arrow tattoo. That's always my favorite when someone gets up to ask a question. They're dressed as Scarecrow or something. They're like, I have a question about Scarecrow. I would probably write Wonder Woman next if I could. I have a whole idea for her actually, which I've been dying to do, but I just don't. I can't. Doing Superman and Batman at the same time really taught me. I think I was capable of doing it and I really enjoyed it, but I don't really, there's too much happening in Batman, honestly, for me. The stuff that I'm responsible for in terms of making sure the other books, I think, have room and are exciting to the people on those books and to you guys, and I do try and play a part in that, you know? Not pushing books and not directing the line or who's on the line, but once a book gets through, like Arkham Academy, right? Or Gotham Academy, I mean, or Arkham Manor, I feel like it's my responsibility too to help those books have room and be supported and to promote them, and you know, we're all part of a team in that way. So I just realized I just don't feel comfortable writing 2 big superheroes at one time, even though I'm fine. I'm capable of it and I enjoy it, it's just not my bag. I'd rather do creator-owned on the side as places to escape superheroes in some ways, and then have superheroes as a refreshing alternative to that. That's my balance, I realized it the hard way too when I only had Superman and Batman. I got real depressed. And it was terrible because I love them both, and I love writing them, and I feel grateful to write them, but not having a place that I knew better than anybody that was like the wait, because it hadn't started yet, that was really hard, because you're writing these 2 massive, important characters, and you have, they belong to everybody, and you don't have a place to go. It's just totally your own cave where you're making stuff up that's yours. And that just got me crazy anxious and depressed, like terrified and depressed. And Greg was actually the one. Greg was a huge help. Greg was that's why I mean he's seriously one of my best friends in the way that Greg will like. I called him up when we were starting Zero Year, and I was like in tears, depressed. Like I love the story. I pitched the story. I know it's my favorite thing. I know it is, but I just don't have. I start writing it and I get panic attacks. Like panic attacks. I can't write it. You know. And he was just awesome. He was just like, he's like, talked me through, and you know, we hung out, and great. So I mean, I'm not built to do that, I think, and write 2 massive superheroes and not have a creator on the side. It's not my thing. Yeah.
So I'm pretty like impressed and excited by what's going on at Marvel in terms of they have like a female Captain Marvel, female Thor, Captain America's going to be black. Do you have any hopes or ideas about doing something that's sort of bold and exciting like that at DC?
Yeah, I mean, and I give them a lot of credit. I love what Marvel's doing in a lot of ways. I mean, my thinking is mostly, that's partly, I think, it's in the zeitgeist to try progressive things, and I don't mean demographically, I mean story-wise, bold things. And the fact that Marvel, and now I think DC with the Batline, like Gotham Academy, and there's a book that's going to be announced soon that I think will really excite you guys, like Gotham Academy, the new Batgirl with Babs and Cameron, the new Catwoman with Genevieve, the new, these books are going to look and feel really different. And the way that I'm excited about what we're going to do on Batman is, yeah, we're bringing in some new characters in different ways. They're not new characters, but characters that we've created, or some new ones, that I think will change the mythology. I'm not quite as interested, and this is just a personal thing, in terms of maybe putting characters in the cowl that are, you know, from different backgrounds, only because I feel like eventually, you know, it's temporary, and you're going to bring Bruce Wayne back in some way. I'm more interested in building a character that could be a sustainable mega superhero from a different background, or from a different demographic, that then stands as an independent identity of their own. And that doesn't mean it's not a knock on anything they're doing, because I think it's great. It's just different taste. My taste is more about trying to build characters that are kind of independent of those identities, that have their own identities, and then, do you know what I mean? And you'll see it happening really soon. There's stuff in Angry too like that, so you'll see. Yeah.
And the second thing, you had told me the story last year when I was at your table getting signing, and I actually just watched you tell it again on comic book resources during an interview, but about how you had been talking with Grant Morrison when you were first getting started on Batman. And I just love the story, and I was wondering if you could share it.
Yeah, sure. Well, Grant, the story, basically I was saying that Grant, one of the things about Gotham is, like, there are all these people that are so scary, right? Like, the writers are scary, like Frank Miller is scary, man. He's scary. And Grant is really intimidating. If you've met Grant, he's like, has this like super tractor beam eyes that you're like, you know. And Denny O'Neil looks like a, you know, he can be scary as well at his best. He looks like, you know, like the old school, you know, Brooklyn, like he could kill you. And that, coming into Gotham, the funny thing is these guys have been really supportive. And I met Denny at a Brooklyn book fair when I started on Detective, and he was like, let me see what you're doing, kid. You know, and I showed him, and I'm friends, you know, friendly with him and his wife. And Grant I had met, I only seen him ever in San Diego. I saw him in New York once, but in San Diego, and I always bump into him. And I bumped into him right before I was doing Detective, and he was like, oh, so you're the new guy, what are you doing? And I totally was like, hi, Grant Morrison. And we were at a booksellers thing, like a dinner where you're supposed to push your book to Barnes & Noble and all this stuff, and I was super out of my league, and I was in a tie, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, I had bought a tie in the neighborhood, because I was so nervous, I was like, I need a tie. So I like bought it at a store and stuck it on. I was like, oh, you know. And I saw Grant Morrison, and I'm like, oh my God, I never met him. And he's like, what are you doing? And I told him all the Black Mirror stuff, and he told me what he was doing with The Return and all that stuff with Bruce Wayne, and he was so supportive. He was like, you're gonna be good. And then I saw him again at the next year when I was starting Court of Owls, and I told him he was also similarly supportive. And then I saw him again when I started Zero Year, this last San Diego before this last San Diego. And he was like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm good. You know, I bumped into him I was walking through the restaurant in the hotel, and I saw him, and I was like, Grant. And he goes, how's the rocket ship ride been? His accent always sounds Jamaican when I do it. So I'm not gonna do it. He's got a great Scottish accent, obviously. And he's like, you know, how's it been? And I was like, oh, it's been great. And he's like, how's it really been? And I was like, I'm really having a hard time right now. Because it was when I was having a hard time with Superman and Batman. And he was like, you know what, here's my, because I had his email, but he had Kristen's email, you know, but he was like, here's my number, you can call anytime, you know. And it was so sweet of him. And he was such a great gentleman about being supportive, about being like, understanding that there are not a lot of people you can talk to when you have problems that everyone would want to kill you to have instead of you, you know, like it's great to have problems. Like I'm writing Batman's origin, like who wouldn't want that problem? But sometimes it gets scary and it's intimidating, and he was such a wonderful person to me, he's always been. And this time, actually in San Diego, this time was a year later, it was the first time we hung out as friends, which was super nice. And like it was the first time we talked and joked around without talking work. And I was hanging out with him actually. It was like it was Jim Lee's birthday and we were hanging out. And which I know is like, I was like, how am I here? I swear to God, it was like only 4 years ago that I was a nobody at this table with Raphael giving away American Vampire, and people would take it and like throw it in the garbage over there, you know, and I'd go get it out of the garbage and put it back on the table and I'm like, how am I now on Jim Lee's birthday at Grant Morrison? I have no idea. It's so weird, I swear to God. I never thought that I would be close to this this area of comics at this point. I never thought that. I'm very grateful to you guys for it, but sometimes it can be very bewildering, that's all I'll say. Meaning sometimes I do feel really overwhelmed and out of my depth and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I haven't had enough time to become the writer I want to be before I'm responsible for things that I am scared of being responsible for, like Batman's whole mythology or his origin, and I'm like, well, I just started, I'm too green, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I haven't been in the, you know what I mean? It's scary. And I'm hanging out with Grant, we're joking around, and he's like, you know, he was like, I read your books. I don't want to say what he said, because it was very sweet of him, and it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but he said something really nice to me about it. He said he read my books in the bath, first of all, which was really funny. He's like, sorry for the image, and I'm like, no, I'll deal with that, I guess. He was like, and they get all wet. I was like, okay. And then he was like, and I read them, and he told me why he read them, and it made me like tear up. I got like all like, oh, you know. And he's like, you're right, Batman, you can't cry. And I'm like, I'm not crying. I'll throw you off this balcony. You know, we were like, okay. And he goes, Lazarus Pit. And I was like, geek back and forth, you know, we were like, so geeky, all of us, you know, like whatever. But it was really great. He's been a real, now I'm proud to call him a friend, like outside of, he was a mentor, he's always been a great guy, but he's like my friend, and I respect him tremendously. And the same with Denny, the same with Frank. Meeting Frank Miller was like, oh, that was like when DC finally made that happen, I've been asking him forever if there was any chance of meeting Frank Miller. No. And then finally it did. And not to get too the sausage making behind the scenes, whatever, but it was after something I argued with them about. And because what I would tell you is that, and this is again, maybe I'm talking out of school and I'm getting in trouble for it, but we do have fights. You do have fights internally, and there have been times like things that have happened that I don't air dirty laundry because it's not. I just don't think I don't think it helps a lot of the time. But there are fights that I've had, and Greg has had alongside me to get things through that haven't been approved, and they are approved or they're not. And we've been very lucky that Greg and I go lockstep, and that's one of the things I would say if you're a writer or an artist, be friends with the person on the book with you, because you guys are a team, and when if editorial comes at you with something you don't want, and you come together, and you're like, we're both leaving this book, if you guys do that, or whatever, it's much harder for them to sort of play against each other. And they're not evil. DC, they have never been bad to me with that, but there will always inevitably be fights, I think, in some ways for everybody on the book, where there are different priorities, and sometimes they want to do an event, or they want to do something that doesn't coincide with what you want to do, and you're going to have to fight, you know. And I could tell you things that you would think, if I told you that might not have happened in the book, I think it would surprise you, and you'd be like, I thought that, how could that not happen in the book? I'd be like, if we had to fight to make that happen in the book. But, you know, those things happen. And what I would say is, like with Frank Miller, something happened like that. And that was kind of after that happened where we all kind of, the dust settled and we were friends again and everything was okay. They were like, how about to celebrate? We finally got a little Frank. Do you want to go out to dinner with Frank? And I was like, yes, I do. Would like that. You know, yes, I would like that. DC. Comics, you know, that. And so we went, and I was so scared. I was like, oh God, he's gonna know. He will have read 0 Year and been like, you rewrote year 1, I hate you, and punch me in the face, and whatever. And I saw him, and like, in 0 Year, you know, we shaved Bruce's head to be more kind of like a jarhead, more like he's like a soldier in this war. And I see Frank, he's coming into the restaurant, he's wearing his black hat, so you know it's Frank Miller immediately. You know, he's like a black fedora, and he's got a black coat, like a black blazer, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Frank Miller. And he looks like a villain, like he looks like a Batman villain, you know, coming at you, and I was like, oh God. I stood up and I started walking towards him, and it's like a restaurant bar, and he looks at me like under the brim of the hat, you know, and you see him, he looks at you, and he's like, and he goes, I've been reading your stuff. Before I even got to say anything, he's like, I've been reading your stuff, and I was like, oh God, here it comes. He's gonna be like, I fucking hate it. And he's like, and you gave Bruce Wayne a good goddamn haircut for once. I was like, I kind of have that as a blurb, like the only blurb I've ever used ever again on everything that I've ever read. And we got along great. We actually really hit it off because I grew up not far from where he lives, and we had a lot of funny stories about places in common. Video store, like the video stop, all these places I grew up with that were like funny little neighborhood things, and he has great ideas. He's got great ideas left and great ideas about things that have happened, and it was just a pleasure. So that's me waxing totally in my own maze in my head about stuff. Yeah.
But I'm really excited about what you got coming for Wytches. Can you expound about that?
Yeah. Wytches is a book I have coming out in the fall in October with Jock, the detective, and Matt Hollingsworth, who colored the wake for us. So it's really, I love this team. And Wytches is basically, it's going to be an ongoing series that goes in issues of kind of like Saga, where it comes out for 5 or 6 issues. We take a few months off, and then we do another. And the idea is, for me, I was walking with my kids. My parents have always had this house in Pennsylvania. We're actually going there when I get back. It's just a little house, like almost like a cabin on the lake. And I was there, and I go for a run a lot of the time around the area. And I was going for a run. I was walking by, and I was going through these trees, this area on this little country road. And the trees, it was windy, and it moved, and it looked like there was kind of a 9-foot person stepping out from behind the tree and looking at you like this out of the side. And then the tree swayed back, and it was gone. And it was this very chills down your spine moment where it was like something could exist in the woods. This skeletal, scary, mutation. It's waiting for you out there. And I was like, I know what that is. I've always been fascinated with witchcraft, and the sense of what if witches are actually these bestial, primal, terrifying creatures, and all the people that we've persecuted in the past as witches are actually just human worshippers of them. And they have this incredible knowledge of natural science, roots, all kinds of tinctures they can make, and they can cure things that modern medicine can't, like all kinds of cancer, paralysis, whatever. But they're cannibalistic, and what they want is for you to give them what they want. And if you give them what they want, they'll give you what you want. But it's always out there as a trade, so I knew it just tapped into this thing for me that's the same interest that I have in all my books, which for me, being a dad, I think one of the scary things is you live for your kids, you do anything for your kids, you love them and you would give up your own life in a second. But there are also times that, wistfully, I think everybody, and even if you don't have kids, but you just have family and friends, you just want to live for yourself. Every once in a while, you're like, man, I wish I had time to do this. You know what I mean? Or that. And it plays on this guilt of kind of feeding the next generation to these things to get what you want. And so it's very, very dark and spooky. And it's definitely the scariest book I've ever written. Easily, hands down, easily. I'm worried that you guys are going to read it. It's going to have a big sale. It'll do well with issue 1, and everyone will read it and be like, not want to read it anymore because it's so scary. In a way where it's not like Saga, and it's not like Sex Criminals. It's not that kind of book at all. I don't know how to place it. I mean, it's like The Walking Dead, I guess, and it's scary or Outcast, but it's not soapy the way those, which I love about it. It's one of my favorite books, but it's not high drama. It's a cold, mean, scary little book, and that's what it is. It's meant to really scare you. That's it. Yeah. You.
Sorry. Have you had a largely personal experience in your life that's really affected you and have bled over to your work in comics?
A largely personal experience that's affected me. I think there are a lot of things, for me, it's just making sure that your interest, the things that keep you up and you're afraid of, get in there. And I don't know what it is for me that got me so anxious about dying and getting older as a kid. That always kind of gets under my skin, but it just has always been there. And, so there are events that I can think of as triggering things or movies I've seen that really got under my skin, but I can't point to any one singular thing, Yeah.
In terms of Batman, but any of your books, what's an idea seed that you planted that's been really long run that you're most proud of? That's not a twist, but
Well, some of the ideas I'm most proud of with Batman, I would say, maybe I don't know what you guys think. I mean, I'd love to hear what you think, but some of the things I'm proudest of are Batman's a pretty cool, or that with 0 Year is the thing I'm proudest of, and it's long and it's crazy, and it might not be as clean, I think, as some of the other things, but it's the thing that I'm proudest of because it's super personal to me about how Batman inspires you when you feel like there's no hope left, and the way you feel when you're really down and depressed, and the way Bruce felt as a kid. And also because it's contemporary, it's about Bruce fighting things that we're afraid of now, like random violence, gun violence, and terrorism, and cataclysm, and superstorms, and climate change. All that stuff's wrapped into the different villains. And so the idea that I'm really proudest of is that, I think, the idea that trying to pit him against the modern sense of fears, modern set of fears, and that he's about inspiration as much as he's about terrorizing criminals. He's also about inspiring you to think that if I can turn myself into this bizarre, weird, twisted pinnacle of human achievement where I'm the best detective and I'm the most badass fighter and I'm also a genius and I'm handsome, but I'm like all those other things, but the things he actually achieves for himself, then you can get past the things in your life that you're afraid of and feel oppressed by, and you can turn yourself into the hero that you want to be. And I think ultimately that's what Gotham is challenged, is the reason people live in Gotham. So I tried to think about that, like, why the hell do we live in Gotham? It sucks. It's always raining, and then you get gassed by the Joker, and everybody's always trying to kill you. This is terrible. Like, why would you stay there? Well, you'd stay there the same reason that you go to wherever you go in life, like the place that you are now, the city, the town, the job. You go to these places, and Gotham is a fictionalization of those places, but you go there because deep down you know that if you can do the thing that you want to do and you're afraid to do, or live somewhere, challenge yourself, you can become the person that you know you want to be deep down, but it's going to take overcoming the challenges and fears that you face in the place you are. And Gotham is the penultimate antagonist that way, where it's a villain, but it's a villain trying to make you what you want to be if you can suffer it. And that idea, to me, I'm very proud of, about Gotham, and I'm also proud of the idea that there are a few things like that. That's probably the one that I think is central to our line that I'm most proud of exploring. Yeah?
So they've announced Teen Titans and Wonder Woman for Earth 1. If you had to pick somebody to reimagine for that, who would it be?
To remake them?
Yeah, Earth 1.
Oh, that's hard, man. I know who's doing this. You mean the books for Earth 1?
Yeah, the graphic novels like Superman, Batman has one.
I know who's on this. They have great people on it.
If you have to pick a character not taken.
Oh, not taken yet?
Flash.
I guess Flash. Flash to me, there's a lot of science to Flash I'm interested in. Yeah, you've had your hand up for a while.
2 questions. Does a face grow back?
We will have to wait and see. I would say that when he comes back, he probably will have a face, yeah.
Okay. And also, so with the Red Hood and Batman, as they're getting like older and farther into the New 52 and comic books, is there kind of like Red Hood being mad at Batman? Is it gonna get worse, or is he is he gonna kind of hate him less?
Well, he thinks that he's gonna hate him more. He hates him because he feels that Bruce has taken the wrong path, and he thinks that Bruce has convinced himself that he's in it not just to be this hero, but that he's not just obsessed with being Batman, but that it's important to have these human relationships with people like Barbara and Dick and Tim and Damian and Harper and all these people and Alfred. And then what Joker is saying is, if you cut off my face, there's just more Joker. You know what I mean, beneath it? And if I cut off your face, there should just be Batman. I don't care who's underneath there. There shouldn't be somebody underneath there. But you've shown me now in Death of the Family that what's beneath there isn't just Batman. And so he's going to hate him. He's going to be like, now I'm going to show you you're not worthy of me anymore, or any of us. You know what I mean? So it's going to get ugly between them in that regard. Not that it was so pretty the last time I guess they fought. But that's the way I see that story when it comes along. As Joker's saying, now it's time to just burn everything because I'm finished with you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure. No?
Does it have to be a Batman question? Or?
No.
Listen, I love what you did in The Wake. I mean, seriously, I think it's some of your best work. I just want to know what you were trying to, what your themes were, like what inspired you to write?
And The Wake for me was a book where it came right when I was struggling with Batman and Superman having those, and I was like, I said to Sean when I pitched it, this has to be a book that's all about being unafraid. It has to be a book about like exploring places beyond the boundaries of your own little island, both metaphorically and logistically in the story, that that when you wake up and you feel scared and you worry that what you find, if you keep looking, for answers, is just going to be more questions in life. And that's one of the things that scares me. I mean, my wife is a surgeon and her doctor, and she does surgery, and I'm like, how can you open up a human body and see all this mechanics and then come home and see like people and see any wonder in life and not just see the meat and gristle and bone? And she's like, because the more you learn and the more you see, the more wondrous and mysterious it is, because there's still something there that's beyond what you can see. It just gets deeper and deeper. And that always fascinates me, that she really believes that curiosity, the universe kind of rewards curiosity. And the book is deeply about that. It's about this sense of both as an artist and a writer together on a book, trying to put things in there and do things that break the rules constantly, so killing everybody halfway through, you know, mixing genres that aren't supposed to go together. All of that stuff is what the book's about, but what it's about story-wise is supposed to be something where ultimately it's meant to be a call to arms for you guys, or to say, don't be afraid to go to the places that you know are scary, where that might just lead to more questions, and that people say you can't go. Because what you find will be that even if it does lead to those things, you'll be proud you went there and it's an adventure along the way. So it was always a place to go and experiment and to explore for us. And that meant a lot to me to have. You know, and I'm very grateful to Sean and Matt for doing that with me, because it was such an exuberant experience of being like, how can we top this with wackiness and still get to the place we want to get to? So it was a really interesting place for me to go. Maybe one more, I think, yeah? Yeah?
Did you have to ask your wife about the science behind reattaching a face?
Actually, I was going to say that to you when you were like, does the face grow back? I was like, that is a question I call my wife. Well, honey, you know, a science question for you. And the funniest thing is I go to these doctor parties and I always get into it with them where I'm like, well, Mr. Cardiologist, when it comes to vampire physiology, you know what I mean? Like I have like 10 degrees in like comic book science, you know what I mean? So I'm like, you might have a degree in real science, but you know, like mermaid neurology. It's like, you know what I mean? And you get all hoity-toity. I totally get like all, I don't know why I try and explain these things. I'm like, well, the venom makes you hallucinate because it's neurochemical. And it's the lipid. And he's like, what? You know what I mean? I can't talk to you, you know? But it's very indignant, very indignant. I'm an expert in my field of totally nonsensical comic book science. But I would say, yes, the face can grow back and probably will grow back in some fashion or other that will be explained at a later date. But I wanted to say thank you to you guys. It really means a lot to me that you came. We have an hour left, man. Go out there. I gotta go back to leave, but go home. But thank you and have a great con.